Hello, my name is Gary Thane, and in this video we're going to look at the segmenting principle, a cognitive theory of multimedia learning championed by Clark and Mayer. So let's start off by describing what it means to segment. You can think of learning in a number of ways, but at its core it's all about acquiring knowledge or a skill. Myers and Clark proposed that people learn better when multimedia message is presented in a user-paced segment rather than as a continuous unit. So the theory behind the segmenting principle is that you as a designer ensure that your e-learning material is divided into manageable chunks. Let's call them bite size. This is especially true when a learner is a novice and trying to learn a new skill or figure out how to complete a task. Since the principle is related to cognitive theory, let's look at it from the point of view of a new learner. As a novice learning a new skill, it can be daunting, especially when the goal appears to be getting to the top and completing the task. But where to start and how to perform the task, and what event and sequence to follow. Plus, where in this design model do you get the opportunity to absorb what you've learned? The segmenting principle changes that model. Instead of seeing the content as a continuous line, it can be viewed as a series of steps. This serves two purposes. First, it gives the learner confidence that they'll be able to achieve the task by breaking the task into multimedia steps. You remove the complexity that may overwhelm the user. Second, it gives the learner time to evaluate what they've learned in that step. You can also move back and forth between the steps and let the learner learn at their own pace. So let's look at a practical example. Let's say you want to learn how to juggle. In theory, you could get 3 balls and start tossing them into the air, mimicking the movements of an expert. This would probably eventually work, but it would take a long time and you would find it frustrating, and you might just give up before you were able to master that skill. The segmenting principle would take a different approach to this problem. Instead of working with 3 balls, you would start with one and master that movement. Once confident that you've achieved that goal, you would move on to the next phase, working with 2 balls. This may be a little more complex, but it's easier to consume now since you've already mastered tossing the first ball. Next, you would move on to working with 3 balls. And if you find that too difficult, you can return to practicing with 2 balls until you're confident and try the 3-ball test again. There's one other part of segmenting principle that I would like to mention. And I tend to think of this as an extension to the segmenting principle. It's called the pre-training principle. As the name suggests, you have a pre-training session to go over some of the basic elements and terminology used in the lesson, key characteristics about the topic, or even how to get the most out of the training. The goal is to provide core or foundational information before the user starts on their learning journey. For example, you might want to tell participants in your juggling class to wear loose clothing and explain the term peak arc, a common phrase in juggling. So, now to summarize. For complex topics, avoid overloading the learner by removing complexity and give the learner the opportunity to absorb what they've learned before moving on. Also, give them the ability to review topics or ideas that they've already covered. Put the learner in control by making it self-paced. And finally, depending on the complexity of the topic and the uniqueness of the information to be delivered, consider some sort of pre-training. Okay, that's it for me. Thank you for listening.